The hall of the great sept of Baelor glittered with gold, jewels, and drunken laughter. King Joffrey, Baratheon, young and cruel, sat at the center of it all, basking in his own arrogance. He lifted his goblet, smirking as servants rushed to refill it at the smallest twitch of his hand. His wedding feast was a spectacle, thousands of guests, flowing wine, and mocking plays performed for his amusement. All of it was meant to remind the world that he was king, and that power belonged to him alone. But at one table, Sansa Stark sat in silence. Her hands were folded neatly, her lips pressed thin, her eyes lowered. She had worn her mask well all evening, obedient, fragile, and submissive. To any watching, she was nothing more than a frightened girl playing the role of the king's little dove. They did not see the storm raging beneath her calm face. For months, she had endured his torments. Joffrey's laughter when her father's head was raised on a pike, his sneers when he forced her to look at it, his constant reminders that she was a hostage, a Stark trophy trapped in a gilded cage. He had beaten her, humiliated her, and forced her to live under his twisted games. Sansa had survived only by being quiet, by being invisible. But tonight, something inside her had snapped. The little vial tucked in her sleeve was heavy, though it weighed almost nothing. She had stolen it carefully, in a way no one would notice him. Herb crushed into powder, purchased with whispered words to a kitchen girl too poor to ask questions. Mixed with wine, it would bring a quick but agonizing death. No plotting lords, no grand conspiracy, just Sansa Stark, finally taking her fate into her own hands. She glanced toward Joffrey as he laughed at the dwarf's crude play. His mother's smile was stiff, his grandfather's frown deep. But Joffrey drank, and drank again, jeering louder with every gulp. Sansa's fingers brushed the vial. Her heart hammered so loud she thought someone must hear it. "Are you well?" My Lady Tyrion asked softly from beside her. He was her husband now, bound to her by Lannister schemes. His eyes were kind, though weary, and he seemed to notice her trembling hands. Yes, she lied, forcing a smile. But she could not meet his gaze for long. The chance came sooner than she expected. Joffrey, red-faced and sweating from laughter, commanded more wine. A servant hurried with the jug, but Joffrey's sharp eyes caught Sansa. "You," he said, pointing his goblet at her with mockery, "wife of my uncle. Little bird, come, pour your king a drink. Show us how well the Starks can serve." The whole chuckled. Sansa rose slowly, the goblet extended toward her. Her palms were damp, her throat dry, but her body moved as if guided by something far stronger than fear. She took the jug with steady hands. Her sleeve brushed the rim of the cup. The tiny vial tipped. No one noticed the powder dissolve into the deep red wine. Sansa filled the goblet, curtsied, and returned to her seat. Joffrey raised it high. "To me," he shouted, "to the one true king." The hall erupted in cheers, goblets clinking. He drank deep. Sansa's breath caught in her chest. For a moment, nothing happened. The laughter returned, the feast went on. Had she miscalculated? Had she been foolish enough to believe she could succeed? Her hands clenched in her lap, nails biting into her skin. Then Joffrey coughed. Once, twice, his face twisted, his eyes bulging. He clawed at his throat, gasping, choking. The hall went silent before exploding into panic. Cersei screamed his name, rushing to his side. Tyrion rose in shock. Lords and ladies scrambled back as the boy king collapsed, his goblet spilling crimson. Wine across the table. Sansa watched, her face a mask of horror like everyone else's, but behind her widened eyes a spark of cold fire flickered. He gurgled and convulsed, hands clawing uselessly, the great king of Westeros reduced to a writhing, choking child. The room shouted for aid. Maesters ran forward. Cersei sobbed, clutching her son as foam and blood dribbled from his lips. The mighty lion of the Lannisters roared in grief, and Sansa sat perfectly still. No one looked at her. No one suspected. She was just the little dove, trembling like the rest, her cup untouched, her lips whispering a prayer. Inside, she whispered something else. Justice. The hall had turned into a battlefield without swords. Screams echoed against the marble pillars as servants fled. Goblets shattered on the floor, and lords shouted over each other. In the center of it all lay Joffrey Baratheon, gasping like a fish pulled from the water, his eyes rolling back as he clawed at his throat. Cersei clung to him, her cries half words, half animal wails. "Help him! Save my son!" she shrieked. At the maesters, who poured tonics down his throat and pressed trembling hands against his chest. It was useless. The boy king was choking on something no tonic could cure, and Sansa knew exactly what it was. She sat frozen in her seat, her face pale, her lips parted in just the right shape of terror. Tyrion was on his feet beside her, calling for calm, but no one listened. Even Tywin, who rarely lost his composure, had risen from his place, his face carved from stone as he watched his grandson convulse on the table. The poison worked swiftly. Joffrey gave one last violent shudder, wine and spit spraying across the feast table, and then he went still. His hand dropped from Cersei's grasp, limp and lifeless. The hall fell into stunned silence. The king was dead. Cersei pressed her face into her son's chest, howling. Jaime pushed past the crowd, dropping to his knees, his golden hand useless. As he tried to lift Joffrey's slack body, lords and ladies looked at one another in disbelief and fear. A king had died before their eyes, not in war, not in a duel, but at his own wedding feast. And then, like lightning, suspicion began to strike. Poison, Maester Pycelle croaked, bending low over the corpse. His watery eyes turned to the goblet lying on the floor, its rim stained red. The boy was poisoned. A murmur rippled through the hall, sharper than any sword. Poison meant treachery. Poison meant conspiracy. Cersei's tear-streaked face snapped upward, her eyes wild, darting from face to face. And then they landed on Tyrion, who still stood frozen, his hand hovering over Sansa's chair as if to shield her. "You," Cersei hissed. Her voice cracked with fury as she rose, pointing a shaking finger. "You did this. You killed him." The crowd gasped. Tyrion's eyes widened. "I did no such thing, guards," Cersei screamed. "Seize him." The king's guards surged forward. Tywin did not speak, did not protest, his face unreadable as white-cloaked men closed around Tyrion. Sansa's breath caught. For one moment, she thought the world might turn and point at her, that someone might notice her steady hands, the slight emptiness in her sleeve where the vial had been. But no, the lioness was blinded by grief, and Tyrion, forever the outsider, forever despised, was the easiest target. "Mother, please." Tyrion protested as two guards wrenched his arms behind his back. "Why would I kill my own king, my own blood, because you've always hated him?" Cersei spat. Her voice was venom itself. "You mocked him, you shamed him, you despised him. Admit it, Imp you killed my son." The room buzzed with whispers. Lords leaned close. Ladies clutched at their pearls. Poison at a royal feast, it reeked of scandal, of secrets, of the sort of tale that could topple dynasties. Through it all, Sansa kept her eyes lowered, her face the perfect mask of grief and fear. She did not look at Tyrion, though guilt tugged at her heart. He had shown her kindness in small ways, had never struck her, had even tried to shield her when he could. And now he was being dragged into the pit she had dug. But Sansa did not move. She could not. To move was to be seen. To be seen was to be questioned. A hand touched her shoulder. She flinched and looked up to see Dontos, the fool, his painted face streaked with sweat. He whispered urgently, "My lady, come with me. It's not safe here." Her first thought was that he somehow knew, that he had seen what she had done. But no, his eyes darted nervously to the guards, to the chaos unraveling at the high table. He was only thinking of her safety, of the Queen's fury that might soon turn from Tyrion to her. Sansa rose slowly, her legs unsteady. All eyes were on Tyrion, who shouted his innocence as the King's Guard dragged him away. No one saw the Stark girl slip from her chair and follow the fool into the shadows of the hall. Behind her, Cersei clutched her dead son and screamed for vengeance. Tywin's cold voice cut through the chaos, commanding order, demanding investigation. The crown was without a king now, and the realm trembled on the edge of war. And Sansa Stark walked away unseen, the taste of victory bitter and sweet in her mouth. She had done it. Joffrey was dead. But as the cries of the hall echoed behind her, she realized something chilling. Killing the king had been the easy part. Surviving what came after that would be the true test. The night air outside the great sept was heavy and cold, carrying the distant echoes of bells tolling for the fallen king. Sansa stumbled down the steps, with Dontos tugging at her arm, his jester's bells jingling faintly in the dark. "Hurry, my lady," he whispered, casting frantic looks over his shoulder, "before the lions begin to bite." Her heart still pounded from the chaos she had left behind. The sight of Joffrey's purple face, the shrieks of Cersei, the cries of poison, it all rang in her ears. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but never like this. In her dreams, Joffrey's death had been clean, righteous, final. But in truth, it had been messy, full of panic, and worst of all, her husband had been seized in her place. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice shaking. "To safety," Dontos said, leading her into the winding alleys of King's Landing. "I promised you, didn't I? I'd get you away from them. Tonight is the only chance we'll ever have." Sansa clutched her skirts and followed. Each step felt heavier than the last, weighed down by guilt and fear. She had wanted freedom. She had wanted revenge, but not like this, not with Tyrion being dragged away in chains for her crime. They reached the river, where a small boat rocked gently against the pier. Dontos urged her inside. "Quickly, my lady, quickly, before they notice you're gone." The boat creaked under her weight, and the black water swallowed the sound. They rowed in silence, the lights of the city shrinking behind them, the red keep looming on the cliffs like a beast watching its prey. Only when they reached the far side of the bay did Dontos speak again. His face, painted with fading colors, looked ghostly in the moonlight. "You're safe now, my lady. Soon you'll be far from this cursed city. Safe." The word felt like a cruel joke. Was she truly safe? Or had she traded one set of chains for another? Back in the Red Keep, safety was the last thing the Lannisters knew. Tyrion had been thrown into a cell beneath the castle, his protests ignored. He sat in the dark, his hands raw from the shackles, replaying the scene over and over in his mind. He had not touched Joffrey's goblet, had not gone near it yet. All eyes had turned to him the moment the boy king collapsed. He knew why. He was the dwarf, the imp, the one the court despised. His sharp tongue had earned him enemies. His stature had made him a target. No one would believe his innocence, not when Cersei's grief was louder than his reason. But there was something else gnawing at him, a shadow at the edge of his thoughts. Sansa, she had been there. She had poured the wine. She had trembled like the rest, but too perfectly, too cleanly. Could she have done it? The thought chilled him. He had never underestimated the girl's suffering under Joffrey's cruelty. He had pitied her, even tried, in small ways, to shield her. But to imagine her capable of murder, poison, of all things, seemed almost unthinkable. And yet, perhaps it was the most natural thing in the world. The court, meanwhile, burned with whispers. Poison at a wedding feast, muttered Lord Mace. Tyrell, red-faced with fury. This is an outrage. Who would dare? The imp, of course, Cersei snapped, her eyes bloodshot, her hair wild as she stalked the council chamber. He killed my son, and I'll see his head on a spike before the sun sets again. Tywin sat in silence at the head of the table, his hands folded. His mind moved like a blade, cutting through grief to cold calculation. The king is dead, he said. Finally, that is fact. But what matters now is what comes after. Tommen must be crowned at once, before the realm smells weakness. And Tyrion, Cersei demanded. Tywin's eyes flickered, but his voice was calm. He will stand trial. We must have order, not chaos. If he is guilty, he will die. If not, he is guilty, Cersei shouted. You saw it, father. You saw it. He hated Joffrey. He wanted him gone. Tywin's gaze hardened. And what of the Stark girl? Cersei blinked. What of her? She was with him. She poured the wine, Tywin said, his tone sharp as a knife. And now she is gone. The chamber went still. Lords glanced at one another nervously. The queen's grief twisted into rage, her face contorting. She fled. The little bird fled. Yes, Tywin said, his voice cold. And birds do not fly without reason. Cersei's hands curled into claws. Then she is guilty too. Her and the imp, they plotted it together. Tywin did not answer, but in his mind, suspicion had already taken root. Sansa Stark, hostage of the crown, suddenly vanished the night the king was poisoned. It was too neat, too sharp to be coincidence. And in the darkness of the city, on a rocking boat that carried her toward uncertain freedom, Sansa Stark shivered. She thought she had escaped, but she had only traded one kind of danger for another. Because now, for the first time, her name was not just a whisper of pity, it was a whisper of guilt. The sea air carried the scent of salt and smoke as Sansa sat huddled in the boat's bow. King's Landing was a shrinking glow on the horizon, its towers and flames dwindling with every stroke of Dantos's oars. She should have felt relief, even triumph, but instead her chest ached with unease. You'll be safe, my lady, Dantos wheezed, sweat dripping from his painted brow. The lions will claw at each other, too busy to chase you. You'll be far away before they even know you're gone. Sansa nodded, though her mind was far from calm. Safe. That word again. Safe from Joffrey. Yes, but not from Cersei, not from Tywin, not from the world that would now call her a murderer. When they reached a darkened cove, another boat waited, a larger one, manned by cloaked figures. Dantos helped her up the rocks, his voice trembling with relief. There, my lady. They'll take you the rest of the way. I've done my duty." Before Sansa could thank him, one of the cloaked men stepped forward, and a crossbow bolt whistled through the night. Dontos gasped, stumbling back. The shaft lodged in his chest. His bells jingled one last time as he collapsed into the sand. Sansa froze, her scream caught in her throat. The man lowered his crossbow, and another pulled back his hood. Petyr smiled. "Poor Dantos," he said smoothly, as though they had merely spilled a cup of wine. "He was never more than a drunken fool. But he served his purpose." Sansa staggered backward, horror flashing in her eyes. You killed him." Baelish stepped closer, his smile never faltering. "And I saved you. You're far too valuable to be left in the care of clumsy oafs. Come now, my lady, you've done something very bold tonight, and bold things require careful friends." His words were honey, but the way his eyes glimmered made her shiver. She followed him into the larger boat, her legs numb, her heart heavier than ever. Freedom had cost her more blood already, and she feared it would demand more still. Back in King's Landing, the game shifted swiftly. Tommen was crowned within days, the boy too timid to argue as Tywin placed the crown upon his head. But the shadow of Joffrey's death loomed over every ceremony. The bells still rang, the people still whispered, and suspicion poisoned the court like rot in a barrel of apples. Tyrion's trial was set. The throne room had never felt so suffocating. The lords and ladies gathered like vultures, eager to watch the imp torn apart. Tyrion stood in chains, his face pale but his eyes sharp. Across the room, Cersei sat rigid, her expression carved from grief and fury. Witnesses paraded forth. Servants claimed they had seen Tyrion near the goblet. Guards swore he had muttered threats against the king. Even Pycelle croaked that the imp had long dabbled in poisons. "And the Stark girl?" Tywin asked at last, his voice carrying through the chamber. The hall buzzed at her name. "She is gone, my lord," Seer Meryn said with a bow. "Vanished the night of the king's death." Cersei slammed her hand against the armrest. "Proof." "Enough." She poured the wine. She fled the same night she and the imp conspired together. Tyrion's laugh rang bitter through the hall. "Ah, yes, the little dove, plotting murder with her hated husband. Do you hear yourselves? She never spoke a word to me that wasn't forced by duty, and yet here I stand, accused of loving her, enough to kill a king for her." "Silence," Tywin thundered. But Tyrion's voice cut again, sharp as broken glass. "You don't want justice. You want scapegoats." The boy was hated by half the realm. Yet here we are, blaming the only two people who suffered most beneath his cruelty. Gasps filled the chamber. Some looked uneasy, others furious. Cersei's face twisted with rage, and she spat, "You'll pay for this insolence with your life." Tyrion only smiled, though it was a hollow thing. "I imagine I will. But remember this, dear sister, the truth doesn't vanish simply because you bury it under lies." In the Vale, Sansa stood upon the deck of Baelish's ship as gulls cried overhead. The cliffs rose tall and jagged, the Eyrie gleaming white. In the distance, Petyr stood beside her, his cloak whipping in the wind, his voice low and smooth. "You did well, my lady. The lion cub is dead, and the realm is weaker for it. But do not let fear trouble you. No one suspects the little dove. They'll waste their fury on your poor husband while you are remade anew." Sansa's hands clenched the railing. "You make it sound like a game." "It is a game," Baelish said softly, his eyes glinting. "And you, my sweet, just made your first move." Her stomach churned. She had thought killing Joffrey would free her. Instead, she had only stepped deeper into webs she did not understand. Her name was whispered in the capital already. Fate hung in the balance, and Baelish's gaze lingered on her too long. Too hungrily. Freedom was not yet hers. She had only traded one cage for another. The Vale was colder than Sansa remembered. The mountain winds howled against the castle walls, biting through even the thickest cloaks. From her chambers in the Eyrie, she could see snow blanketing the peaks, silent and pure, hiding the jagged rocks beneath. It should have brought her peace, but peace never came. Pettier Baelish watched her often, his smiles lingering too long, his compliments too heavy with suggestion. "You are blooming into a woman of strength, my lady," he told her one evening as they dined together. "The girl who once trembled before a cruel boy is gone. You are becoming formidable." Sansa forced a polite smile, though unease coiled in her chest. She had not asked for Baelish's schemes. She had not wanted Dantus's death, nor the blood on her hands. She had only wanted Joffrey gone. But now she was entangled in something larger, something she could not control. At night she lay awake, the wind rattling the shutters, wondering how long she could pretend to be safe. In King's Landing, the trial of Tyrion Lannister consumed the city. Crowds gathered outside the Red Keep, chanting for blood. Some cried, "Justice for the king," while others whispered doubts in dark corners. Tyrion's sharp words had planted seeds, and not all had withered. Inside the throne room, the noose tightened. Witness after witness swore he was guilty. Cersei's voice was the loudest, venom dripping from every word. "He poisoned my son," she declared. "He poured his hatred into that cup, and the Stark girl helped him do it." The mention of Sansa's name stirred murmurs each time. Her sudden disappearance painted her in colors of guilt. Some said she had been spirited away by Stark loyalists. Others whispered darker tales that she had fled with her Lannister husband after the deed was done. Tywin listened without expression, though his gaze often lingered on Tyrion with something colder than disappointment. The trial's turning point came when Seer Marin Trant claimed he had seen Sansa slip something into her sleeve before pouring the wine. A ripple tore through the hall. Tyrion's head snapped toward the man, his voice sharp. "A lie. I was seated beside her. She did nothing of the sort. But the damage was done." The image of the little dove with a vial in her sleeve clung to every mind like a shadow. Cersei smiled through her tears. "The imp defends her because he conspired with her. He cannot deny his own guilt without defending hers." The court roared with agreement, and Tyrion's heart sank. Far away in the Eyrie, the whispers reached even there. Baelish sat with Sansa by the fire, reading aloud from a raven's letter. "And so the court believes you guilty, sweet one. They say you fled with Tyrion, your husband, after plotting Joffrey's death together." Sansa's breath caught. But I didn't flee with him. I never even spoke of it to him." Baelish's smile was thin, his eyes studying her. "Ah, but truth is rarely stronger than rumor. Let them think you guilty. A guilty woman is feared, and fear can be very useful." Sansa turned away, her stomach twisting. She had wanted to disappear, not to be feared. The weight of Joffrey's death was already heavy on her shoulders. Now the world had draped her in the cloak of conspirator, traitor, murderess. "Do not fret," Baelish murmured, leaning closer. "I will keep you safe, as long as you are mine." His words chilled her more than the mountain winds. Back in the capital, Tyrion's patience snapped. He stood before the court, his chains rattling, his voice echoing against marble pillars. I did not kill Joffrey, but I wish I had. Watching him choke on his own cruelty would have been a gift to us all. Gasps filled the hall. Cersei's smile widened. Tyrion's eyes swept the crowd, sharp and bitter. You think me guilty. You want a monster to blame. Very well, let me give you one. I did not poison your king, but I will not weep for him. He was a vicious little tyrant who deserved every ounce of pain he suffered. And if you must put my head on a spike for it, then so be it. The court erupted in shouts, some of rage, some of shock, but behind his defiance, Tyrion's heart ached. He thought of Sansa wherever she was, whoever she was with. Did she watch the snow in some hidden place, her hands clean, her conscience clear? Or had she truly been the one, the little bird who had grown sharp talons in the shadows? The question gnawed at him more than the chains around his wrists. In the Vale, Sansa whispered to herself in the silence of her chamber, I only wanted freedom, but freedom had come wrapped in lies, death, and the hungry eyes of a man who claimed her as his prize. The little dove had killed her tormentor, yet she had not escaped the cage. She had only built a larger one, and now the whole realm rattled the bars. Tyrion Lannister stood in chains beneath the Iron Throne, his fate sealed long before the first witness had been called. The crowd screamed for his death, their anger stoked by Cersei's tears and Tywin's silence. Even the whispers of doubt had been smothered beneath the weight of Sansa's disappearance. She fled because she was guilty, Cersei spat, her voice sharp as a knife, and he defends her because he shared her crime. Poisoners both, traitors both. Let their names be cursed. Tyrion's jaw tightened. He had no illusions, now this was no trial, but a play, and he had been cast as the villain. His sharp tongue had only worsened his lot, but he would not bow, not even now. I demand trial by combat, he said at last, his voice cutting through the hall like steel. A hush fell. Some gasped, others grinned in delight at the thought of blood to come. Tywin's expression did not change, though the faintest flicker of displeasure crossed his eyes. So be it, the Lord Hand decreed. Cersei wasted no time. I name Seer Gregor Clegane as my champion, the Mountain, a beast in human form, taller and broader than any knight in the realm. The court murmured, some in pity, some in cruel anticipation. Tyrion lifted his chin. Then I will name my champion as well. His heart sank when Oberyn Martell volunteered. The Red Viper had his own reasons, vengeance for his sister's murder, but Tyrion knew it was a gamble. He had placed his life in the hands of another man's thirst for justice, and when the duel came, it ended as it must. Oberyn danced, struck, mocked, and dazzled the crowd with his speed and skill. For a moment, hope flickered in Tyrion's chest. The Mountain staggered, bloodied, wounded. Victory seemed within reach. But Oberyn wanted more than victory. He wanted confession. He circled, demanding the truth of Ilya's murder, shouting accusations, pressing for words instead of death. And in his pride, he faltered. The Mountain's hand seized him, crushed him, dashed his skull upon the stones. The Red Viper was nothing but gore and silence, and Tyrion's hope shattered with him. The court roared. Cersei smiled. Tywin pronounced the sentence, death. Tyrion would be executed for a crime he had not committed, and somewhere far from the Red Keep, the true murderer sat by a window of cold stone, her hands clasped tight, her heart pounding with the memory of wine spilling red across a feast table. In the Eyrie, Sansa Stark listened as Baelish brought her the news. "They've condemned him," he said with a faint smirk, as though it were a jest told over wine. "The imp will lose his head soon. The court rejoices. Your secret is safe." My sweet Sansa's stomach turned. "He didn't do it." No, Baelish agreed smoothly, "but no one cares. The world does not run on truth, my lady. It runs on power, and you, whether you realize it or not, have wielded more of it than most queens." She flinched at his words. Power. That was not what she had wanted. She had wanted freedom, escape a life where she could breathe without fear. Yet her one act of defiance had become a storm that drowned others in its wake. "Tyrion will die. Because of me," she whispered. Baelish stepped closer, his hand brushing her hair with a gentleness that made her recoil inside. "He will die because he was weak, because he was foolish enough to think truth could save him. But you, my sweet, are learning, and I will teach you how to survive this game, how to win it." His smile lingered, cold and hungry. Sansa looked away, out at the endless snow falling over the mountains. And for the first time, she wondered if Joffrey's death had been a victory, or merely the first link in a new chain. Word of Tyrion's sentence spread across Westeros like wildfire. Some cheered, others whispered. In taverns and keeps, people asked the same question. If Tyrion had not poisoned the king, had Sansa Stark done it? The little dove, so meek, so quiet, could she truly have been the one to strike down the lion? The rumor grew, sharper and darker, with each telling. To some, she was a hero Stark, blood-avenging Stark suffering. To others, she was a witch, a traitor, a serpent hiding beneath a maiden's face. And in King's Landing, Cersei's hatred grew with every whisper. "Find her," she hissed to her guards. "Scour every keep, every port. I want her head on a spike beside the imps." In the Eyrie, Sansa felt the weight of the whispers pressing on her chest, even as Baelish whispered his own poison. In her ear, "You are not a dove anymore," he told her one night, his hand lingering too long on hers. "You are a falcon now, sharp and strong. One day they will kneel to you not for pity, but for fear." Sansa lay awake after he left, her stomach churning, her heart hollow. She had wanted to kill one boy. Instead, she had unleashed a storm that was beginning to consume them all. And though she had escaped King's Landing, she realized with growing dread that her freedom had been bought with another man's life. Tyrion's blood would be on her hands as surely as Joffrey's. The Red Keep reeked of smoke and blood the day Tyrion's sentence was to be carried out. The bells tolled once more, heavy and grim, as the city gathered to see the imps fall. They chained him at dawn, dragging him from his cell. His beard had grown wild, his eyes sunken, yet his spirit was not broken. He walked with his head high, even as jeers followed him through the streets. Children threw stones, women spat, men shouted curses. To them, he was the monster who had poisoned their king, the dwarf who had dared mock the crown. But Tyrion's thoughts were far from the crowd. They lingered on the little bird. On Sansa, he remembered her trembling smile at the wedding, the way her hands had shaken as she poured the wine. And for the first time, he admitted to himself what he had long suspected. She had done it. He almost laughed at the bitter irony. The court had hanged the crime on him, yet the true culprit had flown free. He could hate her for it, but strangely, he did not. A part of him even admired her. The girl had been beaten, mocked, and caged, yet in the end, she had struck harder than any knight. Perhaps it was fitting. He had always been underestimated, and knew what it was to be despised. At the scaffold, Cersei stood watching with hungry eyes, her lips twisted in a smile that did not match her grief. Tommen, too young to protest, looked on with confusion and fear. Tywin stood like a statue, cold and silent, as if this execution were nothing more than business. The crowd hushed as Tyrion mounted the platform. He looked out at the sea of faces, at the banners fluttering above, and spoke. His voice rang clear, sharper than any sword. I stand here, accused of a crime I did not commit. But let me tell you this, your king choked on more than poison. He choked on his own cruelty, his own spite. He ruled with fear, and so he died unloved. Gasps spread through the crowd. Cersei's face twisted with rage. I pity you, Tyrion continued, his eyes sweeping the hall. For you cheer his death, yet hang it on the wrong man. The truth is out there, hidden in plain sight, but you will never see it. You are blinded by your own hate. He paused, a small, bitter smile touching his lips. So kill me. Put my head on your spike. But remember, this sure true enemies still walk free. Before anyone could answer, the sword fell. The imp was no more. The crowd roared. Some cheered, some wept. Cersei's smile widened, her vengeance complete. Tywin gave the faintest nod, as though crossing a task from his endless ledger. And across the sea of mountains, far in the vale, Sansa Stark woke screaming from her sleep, the phantom sound of bells and steel ringing in her ears. Baelish came to her chambers when he heard. He found her pale, trembling, staring into the fire as if it might burn her sins away. He's dead, isn't he? She whispered. Petia's smile was soft, almost tender. Yes, sweetling. The imp has met his fate. The lions have had their vengeance. Her throat tightened. She wanted to weep, to scream, to confess, but no. Tears came. She only stared at the flames, her voice low. It was me, not him. It was me. Baelish stepped closer, tilting her chin until her eyes met his. And you did right. The boy king deserved his fate. Tyrion was always doomed. His name, his stature, his wit, they painted a target on his back, long before you ever touched that cup. He was a casualty of the game, nothing more. Sansa pulled away, her voice sharp. You call it a game, but people die. Baelish's smile thinned. Of course they do. That is why you must learn, better them than you. His hand brushed, her cheek lingering too long, too warm. One day you will understand. One day you will thank me for saving you, for shaping you into something more than a frightened girl. But Sansa felt no gratitude, only dread. The walls of the Eyrie pressed close around her, a cage dressed in snow and stone. Joffrey's cruelty had been sharp and open, like a blade. Baelish's was quieter, softer, a poison that seeped slowly into the veins. And she realized, with a sinking heart, that her fight was not over. She had killed a king, yet her true battle had only just begun. In King's Landing, Cersei poured herself wine, her hands trembling. She had Tyrion's head, but her grief did not lessen. In the silence of her chambers, she whispered Joffrey's name, clutching his crown as though it might bring him back. And still the whispers grew. Sansa Stark, the little bird, the vanished bride. Some claimed she had fled to the north. Others said she had been spirited away by allies. To some, she was a murderer. To others, a symbol of vengeance against the crown. Her name spread like wildfire through the realm. And Sansa, sitting in the snowbound vale, realized that no matter where she hid, no matter what Baelish promised, her name would follow her. She was no longer the little dove. She was the shadow behind a king's death, and shadows, once cast, never fade. Snow fell endlessly in the vale, soft and quiet, muffling the world in white. To anyone else, it might have seemed peaceful. To Sansa Stark, it felt like a shroud. She stood on the balcony of her chamber in the Eyrie, watching the flakes drift down onto jagged cliffs, her breath turning to mist in the air. Joffrey was gone. Tyrion was gone, and yet there was no peace in her heart, only the heavy truth. Both their deaths were hers to bear. Baelish entered without knocking. He always did. His voice was low, warm, as if he spoke not to her, but to the memory of her mother. "You've grown, sweet one, stronger than you realize. The whole realm trembles with your name." Sansa turned, her eyes sharp. "They think me a murderer." "You are a murderer," Petyr said simply, stepping closer, his smile faint. "But that is no curse. It is a crown, if you know how to wear it." Her stomach twisted. He made it sound like power, but she knew the truth. It was guilt. It was loneliness. It was the knowledge that every night, when she closed her eyes, she still saw Joffrey's face contorted in agony, and Tyrion's standing proud before the sword that cut him down. "I never wanted this," she whispered. "I only wanted to be free." Baelish reached out, brushing snowflakes from her hair, his fingers lingering too long. "Freedom is an illusion. Safety, power, survival, these are the only truths that matter, and you, my sweet dove, now hold the sharpest truth of all. You are feared." Sansa pulled back, her eyes burning. "If all I am is feared, then I am no different than Joffrey." For the first time, Petyr's smile faltered. A flicker of something cold passed through his eyes. He leaned close, his voice like a knife. "Do not mistake cruelty for fear. Joffrey ruled like a child with a blade. You, Sansa, can rule like a woman with a crown. That is the difference." But she did not believe him, not fully, not anymore. Word of her guilt spread farther each day. In the taverns of the Riverlands, songs began to take shape. The dove who killed the lion, the maiden with poison in her sleeve. Some sang her as a heroine, avenging her family's honor. Others cursed her as a treacherous snake who betrayed the crown's mercy. In the north, whispers reached broken bannermen of House Stark. Some swore she had done what they could, not that she had struck down a king. Others said she was lost forever, tangled in the webs of southern snakes. And in King's Landing, Cersei sharpened her hatred like a blade. "She killed him," the queen hissed in her chambers, clutching her son's crown. "I can smell her guilt, even from here. I will not rest until her head rots on the gates of the city." The realm was breaking again, the ripples of one poisoned cup spreading wider than any sword could cut. One night, Sansa stood before the great moonlit window of the Eyrie, her reflection staring back at her. She no longer recognized the girl. She saw, her cheeks were hollow, her eyes too old for her face. She whispered aloud, though no one was there to hear, "I killed him." The words hung heavy, but strangely they steadied her. It was the truth she had never spoken, not even to Baelish. Joffrey's death had been hers, her hand, her choice. And with the truth came clarity. She could not undo it. She could not free Tyrion from the grave, nor cleanse her hands of blood. But she could decide what came next. She could remain Baelish, little bird, forever caged, forever whispered about, or she could take the shadow of her crime and make it her own armor. Perhaps, she thought bitterly, that was freedom, not innocence. but the strength to shape what the world already believed. When Baelish entered her chambers the next morning, he found her seated at the table, her back straight, her eyes clear. For once, he did not see the frightened girl he thought he owned. "What are you plotting, sweetling?" he asked, smiling, though unease flickered behind his gaze. Sansa met his eyes, her voice calm, steady. "You said fear is power. Then let them fear me. But I will decide how." Baelish's smile froze, then widened again, masking the crack she had forced in it. He bowed slightly, hiding his surprise. "Ah, at last, you begin to understand." But in that moment, Sansa knew something he did not. She would never let herself be his pawn. Not forever, not again. She had killed one king. She had survived the wrath of another. And though her hands were stained, she was still a Stark. The game was not over. It had only just begun. And so the story spread across Westeros. The girl who killed her king. Some cursed her, some praised her, but all remembered her. Sansa Stark, the dove who poisoned the lion, who shattered the crown with a single sip of wine. Not a mystery, not a conspiracy, just Sansa.